Hey, so it's another weekly YouTube Live, American accent coaching for Brazilians who already speak English well and want to get closer to an American accent. So we do this typically every week. Last couple weeks, we've had some issues. I've skipped the live for various reasons, but today we're getting back into the rhythm. You know, imperfectly, had some technical issues today, but we're diving in better late than never. So I figured I'd hop on, see who's here today, and try to get back into this weekly rhythm. So again, the way this works is I'll open up a Zoom room for anyone who is the right fit. You can just hop in and I can give you some live coaching. You don't have to show your face. I guess my setup's a little different today, but I should be able to do it sort of just audio only. And so as long as you're okay with your audio being heard by the other people here on the YouTube Live, then I can give you some free accent coaching. And if you don't want to appear on the Zoom Live, or you don't actually join there, you can still ask me questions in the YouTube chat. So I'll try to interact with people in the chat as well. So let me go ahead and share the link for the Zoom. Let me switch to that, and I'll try to help you guys get closer to an American accent, assuming you're Brazilian and already speak English well, just because it's a little bit different if you don't already speak English well, or if you're not Brazilian, some of the assumptions change. So that's why I have that, is to do a better job of helping that specific kind of person instead of just an okay job of trying to help everyone. Okay, so Zoom, let me get that going. But again, drop your questions in the YouTube chat, whatever you're struggling with.
Recording in progress.
There's a chance my audio is not set up right. Let me check something. Oh, that's a bummer. I think the first part of this YouTube Live is probably with no audio. That's funny. Oh, maybe it's actually got some audio, but probably not good quality. Let me switch that. Test. Okay, so hopefully, let me reset the audio. Testing. Okay, hopefully the audio should be better now. Okay, so drop your questions in the YouTube Live, whatever words or sounds or phrases or how to practice, whatever it is you're struggling with when it comes to accent. Let me know and I'll try to help you. And then I'll go ahead and drop the link to join the Zoom as well. Okay, so that's the link to the Zoom in the YouTube chat. And let's see here. My setup's different. I'm not in my usual space. So some of this is technical troubleshooting, so thanks for your patience with that. But as I keep doing this, it'll get better in future weeks as I figure out this new setup. And yeah, the way I see these live is kind of like office hours. Some weeks we'll have more people, some weeks we'll have fewer people. I would guess this week there will be fewer people since, again, I had some issues last couple weeks, but getting back into the flow of things this week since we missed the last few lives. But I want to show up here not just for my clients, but for people who aren't clients as well, and give a space to answer questions. And I think as I do this more consistently and sort of advertise it better, this will become an interesting space to help people. And to me, it's not just about the number of people, it's about just whoever is here helping them. And so I'll hang out here for a bit. If we don't have anyone here today who needs help, then that's okay. And we'll come back again next week, and I'll try to keep becoming more consistent and bringing this up better. But yeah, again, if anyone is joining today, just drop a question here in the chat. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're curious about when it comes to accent, words, phrases, sounds. Azhiel, hey, how's it good? How's it going? Good to see you again. Yeah, sounds, words, phrases, anything you're struggling with or curious about, or how to train accent, let me know in the chat. Or if you want to join the Zoom, the Zoom link is in the chat. I can repost it if you can't see it. I'm not sure if it shows it if you join after I posted it, so I can repost it if needed. If you could just click that Zoom link, and then you'll be in the waiting room, and I can approve you to join. We can do some live accent coaching if you would like. How's it going, Azhiel? You want some coaching today? You got any questions? Here just to watch. So far, I don't think we have too many people joining today. We'll see how it goes. But if you need help, I'm here to help. Otherwise, we may keep it a shorter one today. Potentially talk about some of the stuff I'm helping clients with recently. Just want to make sure that I don't share anything private while I do that, but I should be able to do that, I think. Let me see. This is an interesting setup I got going today. Let me check my shortcuts here. Curious how that works. I can't see what I'm doing. Interesting. I'll check the recording. That'll help me figure. What if my internet's having issues? Said OBS Studio disconnected. That's a bummer. Reconnection is successful. Cool. Quick live today? Yeah, probably a fairly quick live. Eddie Angela said, hi, just watching today. Yeah, no worries. Feel free to just hang out. Never any pressure to participate. If we don't have anyone who actually wants live coaching, I may just, ramble a bit about some of the things I've been looking at, working on in my business, helping clients with lately, exploring my own accent, anything that's kind of on my mind. And that works too, kind of a weekly check-in. But this is, again, sort of weekly office hours where I want to be available for non-clients, people who are not clients, just to give you guys a space to get some help. So hopefully you can hear me okay. Seems like I've got some internet issues and some technical issues, but we'll keep going. So, but with this client, to help her learn how to say world better, so learned R plus L, ol, so the dark L, there's some specifics around those, but assuming you've got those already, if you don't, those are things that can be worked on. But then it was working through this sort of list of words that all include the R plus L combination. So first of all, the word Earl, which is a name, is literally just R plus dark L. So ol, Earl. Then if we put a B in front of it, burl. If we put a K in front of it, curl. So you can make a bunch of different words just by switching out what comes before the R in the RL combo. So blank plus R plus L. So if we do a F, you get furl, which is a word. If you do a G, you get girl. H, you get hurl. If you do an M plus a hidden Y sound, you get mural. If you do an N, you get neural, like as in having to do with neurons or the brain or that kind of thing. If you do a P, you get pearl. If you do an R, you get rural. And my Zoom says it's struggling to connect. Man, that is a bummer. I think my internet's really not a constraint. What is the core hard part? Instead of running away from that and hoping it magically fixes itself, you want to run toward it. Run toward the difficulty and train it obsessively. So if you're struggling with R plus L in words like world or squirrel, we want to isolate that R plus L chunk as a key difficult piece and train that until mastery. Train it not just until you get it right due to luck, but train until you can't get it wrong based on actual skill. At least that's a useful way to think about it. You'll probably still mess it up occasionally. It's hard to do it 100% of the time, but we want to move in that direction as much as possible. But yeah, so we can keep swapping out what consonant we put before the target chunk. So if the target chunk is R plus L, again, you kind of run through the alphabet or phonetic alphabet or possible sounds, whatever you want to use. But yeah, just kind of go, okay, put a B in the front, put a C in the front, put a D in the front, skip the E because it's a vowel, put an F in the front, and you get, burl, curl, furl, girl, hurl, mural, neural, pearl, rural, whirl, squirrel. And you can also do things that aren't technically words, but you can still say them. They're still, a possible sequence of sounds. But a lot of them are going to actually be words in the English language. And then from there, you can work on adding a D at the end as well. And you're getting another step closer to world. So instead of a W at the beginning of this R, L, D sequence, you can, instead of W, do like a B, a C, a D, an F, a G, etc. And again, some are words, some aren't. You can go burled, curled, durled. I don't think that's a word, but furled, gurled, hurled, purled, and practice through that. And you might find that some of these are easier, some of them are harder, but you can take the ones that are easier and use those to kind of build a bridge towards the harder ones, because it's all going to be kind of the same thing. So you want to hold the part that you can do constant and then try to just switch out the one sound and still do it in the way that you're able to do, and not lose that and kind of babysit it, like hold its hand as you cross this bridge to the new context, if that makes sense. Let me pop back to YouTube comments. So as Hale said, maybe not made very clear about the flap T issue. You think that on phrases with more T sounds, you think some sounds sound more like D and others more like a weaker T. Get it out, go and get it out. I'll have to think about that. Is it normal for the vowel sounds in last and cat and bad to sound different to me when different people pronounce them? Sometimes some teachers say it sounds like an A in Portuguese. Yeah, I mean, different people have slightly different accents, say their vowels slightly differently. And some of it could be a perception thing where you think they're saying it differently, but maybe they're not. But it's also very possible that they are actually saying it meaningfully differently, and you're noticing that. And even the same speaker might say the same vowel sound slightly differently depending on the moment or the word, the context. So it's about variation and invariance. So like, when is there variation? How much do things vary? And when can we say that despite potential variation, we can say that, oh, the variation is small enough for certain things that we can say they're basically the same. And so that's kind of the dance or the challenging part of accent and language and speech, is figuring out how that works. And it's a little bit messy. Because yeah, you might hear some people do a ah, you might hear it positioned slightly differently, but still be basically one sound, like a like it could vary around its space somewhere. You could hear not just one vowel sound, but kind of two vowel sounds connected together, like a kea, bad, or something like that. Like for me, I do that when it's before an N or an M, like man, ham. But I don't do it before other consonants like bad or cat. There I just do a ah. And before an NG, it often becomes almost an A sound, like language, angry, etc. So yeah, it depends. But so back to the question about the flap T issue. Let me see if I can understand. I assume maybe this is you were reviewing the last live that you participated in, and I probably gave you some advice, and you're trying to clarify that. Let's see. So do I think that in phrases with more T sounds, do you mean multiple T's or like a TS? I assume you mean multiple T's. Do I think that some sounds sound more like a D and others more like a weaker T? Get it out. Get it out. Get it out. I don't know. I have to think about it more, but I think sometimes you can end up with something where it's not just about D and T, but you have to kind of think beyond that, and potentially a D and a T can sound exactly the same. So like ladder with Ladder versus ladder with Latter. It's possible to say them differently, ladder, latter, but often in everyday speech I just say ladder for both, which is the flap T idea, where it ends up being the same exact sound for both the D and the T, as far as I'm aware anyway. I'm not aware of an actual difference there. I'm always open to that possibility, if we notice that there is a difference, but I think there's often no difference between a D and a T, and when it's in that kind of flap T or flap D kind of context. But yeah, again, if we need to be more clear, then we can start to create a difference. We can start to say things more like a D or more like a T, but I think sometimes it becomes this kind of sound that could be either one. It's ambiguous. It's a member of both the D category and the T category, that flap T sound, that alveolar flap. So it's kind of like a yes and no answer of like, it's possible to say it where there's a difference and it can sound more like a D in some cases and more like a T in other cases, but it's also possible to say it where I would argue there is no difference and it is genuinely ambiguous. It's not clear whether the person said a D or a T, and you need more information based on context or based on pronouncing it more like a D or more like a T, repronouncing it again. But I would argue there are cases where the sound is in itself, it's not clear whether it's a D or T. Could be either, depending on interpretation. So I guess that's my attempt at an answer there. Next questions here is devoicing the D in words like and. So it sounds like and with a D that almost sounds like a T at the end. I don't know how to explain. I'm sorry. Is it wrong to do? And I'm trying to think. And so maybe like the stop part sounds like a D, but then the release sounds like a T. And I assume that's what you're getting at. I don't think that is wrong. And the definition of right and wrong is often an interesting thing to question anyways, because you can do whatever you want. I think it's useful to question right and wrong when it comes to speaking. And I find it more useful a lot of the time to think about alignment with specific communities or people. If you want to sound like a certain group of people, kind of match a certain type of speaking, a certain type of accent, then instead of right and wrong, you can just think about, are you sounding like them or are you sounding different than them? And then it's about alignment, how closely aligned you are with that group or that person's specific way of speaking. So I think that's kind of a less judgmental way to think about it than right and wrong. It's less absolute and it's more about just getting close to something, whatever that something is. Or you can think about like your own preference. So even if you're not aligning with some specific group, you could just think, you know what, I prefer this or whatever. And so I think, first of all, yeah, questioning right and wrong is useful to go beyond that. But then if you are trying to align with a specific group, then yeah, we can try to align with a so-called general American accent or something like that. And I would argue, because I think that's probably what you're asking, that doing and with kind of a T sound towards the end, I don't think it's wrong. I think you'll probably hear native speakers with a so-called general American accent do that. I think. I'm not sure. We'd have to fact check that, find audio examples of it and stuff, but I'm pretty sure you will find that. So I think that's fine. Next one. It seems to me that the IT flap is more frequently weak, like in the word it, I assume, connected, with a vowel after, like it always, it is, or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I might need to hear audio or something to understand like this idea of like a stronger flap versus a weaker flap. Maybe this is like a potential upgrade for how I think about it or something. Because I guess in my head it's probably oversimplified, but I'm kind of like, uh, as far as whether it's a D or a T, I would still argue it's ambiguous. And maybe the flap could have a little more or less pressure or something. I'm not sure. But I think it would, by definition, kind of a weak sound, the flap compared to a D or a T sound where there's potentially sort of a more forceful kind of stop and release involved a lot of the time. Whereas a flap is just kind of a very light, quick, brief, arguably weak interruption in the flow that doesn't fully stop. It's just a quick tap or flap. It is. So I think it's kind of by definition fairly weak. And again, if you look at like ladder versus ladder, or we could come up with other examples. Trying to think of other examples. But yeah, I mean, to me, a flap or tap sound is just kind of, it is this kind of weak sound, if we want to use that word. So let's see. Next one. Yeah, that single vowel is my arch enemy in English. I forget if it's arch enemy or arch enemy. I think it's arch enemy. I was thinking about the word archangel or archangel recently. So I guess I'm a little bit confused in my own head here. English is weird, even for me sometimes, even for native speakers. Yeah, languages are strange and inconsistent sometimes. But yeah, so back to this comment. Yeah, that single vowel is my arch enemy in English. I need more feedback from my native speakers and confidence. It's crazy that I can hear it perfectly but not speak it. Well, we could question, can you hear it perfectly? Because sometimes we think we can, but we don't realize what we're missing yet. And so sometimes there might be things you're not actually hearing yet. So false positives where you think you notice something or you don't notice a difference or whatever, but there is not the thing you're thinking you're noticing, or you think there's no difference, but there is a difference. Sometimes there are these blind spots, these gaps, and we can learn to notice things that are hiding in front of us. So that would be one thing. But then, yeah, maybe you can hear it, quote unquote, perfectly or well enough, but not speak it. That's also very much valid or very much possible that you can hear a difference, but are struggling to actually produce it, to speak it. But yeah, if we're being kind of rigorous in how we think about it, we can look at each layer of the stack or each part of the process, and there could be gaps in any part of it, right? So it's hard to say for sure. And anytime someone says something like perfectly or something absolute, I think that's always, if we're thinking rigorously, zoom in on that sound and get some audio of native speakers, get some audio of yourself trying to say it, and compare those audios back and forth, really focusing on that vowel sound. And if you know how to edit audio or, play back just the vowel sound and not the entire word, or just the word and not the whole phrase, things like that, you could use, software like Audacity, which is free, or there's probably other software that's easier to use somewhere, but that's the one I tend to use. And you can then kind of compare side by side, one immediately after the other, native speaker, 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus 4, and try to notice possible differences, possible similarities. And you can mix in yourself in that too, and compare yourself versus a specific negative speaker or native speakers, or a specific audio, a specific moment that a specific native speaker said the vowel. And again, it's kind of messy because even one native speaker says one vowel slightly differently depending on the moment. But it's through that variation trying to find something that is meaningfully constant, meaningfully invariant, something that, even though it's varying in a lot of ways, you can find something that's basically stable. And your brain is probably pretty good at that, but you need to keep feeding it the raw data to kind of update for the American accent version of things. Because your brain is probably really good at that for the Brazilian Portuguese version of things, and has the ability to do really well at that for sounds in general, but it probably gets kind of stuck on the Brazilian Portuguese version of things, and you have interference and got to kind of shake things up or update things to notice some new distinctions and ultimately be able to speak them as well. Yeah, I would try to listen to the audio and then try to imitate it. Like a useful feedback loop is listen to a native speaker saying the thing you want to say, and then try to say it out loud and try to say it exactly like they did. Try to match the vowel perfectly. And I don't just mean, oh, you did ah or e, like big differences. I mean tiny differences. Like, was it ah, ah, eh, like where in vowel space is it? These tiny, tiny differences that are kind of in between vowel sounds, like slightly tuning, slightly adjusting the vowel sound. That's the kind of level I'm talking about, is to try to really match how the native speaker said it, and then potentially using technology to help. So recording yourself and then playing the recording of yourself and comparing that recording versus the original audio, and then seeing if you can hear a difference. Because sometimes you think you're saying it right. As soon as you say it out loud, you're like, oh no, that was terrible. Or you hear it out loud as you're speaking live and you think you got it right. But then you listen to the recording and you're immediately like, oh no, that's not at all what the target was. So it's just kind of trying to reduce the risk of false positives. So again, we often think we're doing it right, at least at the beginning. And it's about, I mean, always, but especially in the beginning. But it's about continually reminding ourselves, what else are we missing? What gaps are still hiding from us? And using smart ways of practicing to help expose those hidden gaps, to reveal them, to make them obvious, or at least detectable and eventually obvious. And so, yeah, speaking out loud, imitation, immediately after hearing the target audio can be helpful. And then recording yourself and comparing can be helpful. And getting outside feedback can also be helpful. I mean, recording yourself is already sort of externalizing feedback, making the internal become external, making it kind of outside, because now you're hearing a recording of yourself instead of hearing yourself within your own head. So that's a step in the right direction. But still, there can be some biases and things that get in our way with our own ability to detect things. So sometimes then starting to ask other people or even AI or other kind of externalized ways of assessing things can help. None of it is perfect, so we're kind of triangulating things. Don't trust any one source of feedback 100%, but get multiple sources of feedback. Stay skeptical, try to think rigorously, stay curious, and you can start finding your way through the darkness closer and closer towards the reality, the kind of messy reality of how sounds actually work. But again, it's kind of triangulating across multiple sources of feedback and never getting too confident, but not letting that stop you from moving forward anyways. I don't know. There's some deeper lesson here around like comfort and ambiguity. Okay, let me keep going through comments. Just kind of saying what comes up in my head for these things, and hopefully it's helpful for some of you or all of you. IDK, if you answer not only about pronunciation questions, yeah, I usually do mainly pronunciation, accent, sound stuff. Once in a while, I'll do something else, but I try to limit it. But let's see. So there's a thumb rule of thumb. I don't think anyone says thumb rule that I'm aware of. But yeah, there's a rule of thumb to use the verb come without ending up sounding dirty and embarrassing yourself among people from another country. I think it's mainly context. Because yeah, it's literally the same pronunciation, potentially different spelling, not always, as far as whether it's a sexual meaning or a neutral day-to-day meaning of like, come here, come over here, like to move in the direction of someone. And so, yeah, I think it's mainly context, but literally the pronunciation is the same. So it might become like a phrasal verb, like come on, come up, but even some of those cases like could be yeah, a sexual interpretation depending on the moment. So I think it's mainly context, and there's not a perfect, magic trick to prevent all misunderstandings there, other than I don't have a perfect answer, but what's coming up in my mind is to start getting familiar with what the possible sort of dirty interpretations would be so that you can navigate around those. Because if you don't know what they are, you might say them by accident. So I think part of it is learning what those are so that you can choose not to say them and you can kind of avoid those landmines, if that makes sense. As Hale said, do you think it's much of a regional topic about sounding love so differently? I would say maybe pronouncing love, I think, because to me at least, I hear people saying, and you're using symbols from Portuguese, right? So this is by definition going to be imperfect, but we'll go with it. I hear people saying sort of o aberto, so maybe I'll attempt to kind of say this the way I think of it, which will be imperfect, but love and otherwise love, 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 and I would say love, which is arguably neither of those, right? So again, this is messy. And is it a regional topic? Sure. I think, again, accent, pronunciation, there's lots of variation. And so there won't just be this one single point that all speakers follow. There's going to be variation. And within, so-called American accents, there's many different ways of saying any given vowel sound across, all the native speakers of English in the US, or however we want to divide things. So you will hear variation, and I'm not an expert on exactly what the range of variation is. I'm always learning about that. But yeah, it would make sense if you hear some variation. But again, it's also going to be, in addition to the variation of what is happening in reality with those native speakers' accents, you have the extra layer of challenge and I also have, but each of us has our own biases or how we perceive things. So there's arguably the kind of cold, hard reality of how that person said the sound in terms of kind of the physics of how it was actually said. And then there's the perception aspect. So any given, human listener, how they then interpret that imperfectly with their ear, their brain. Maybe it's mainly a brain thing, but so again, it's kind of triangulating things. You might think that it sounds like a sound from Portuguese, but that may be, and you may just be doing that to communicate, because I know it's hard to write things compared to saying them. Writing is very much imperfect. But the key is we often have kind of an existing category in our brain. And then when we hear a sound that's maybe in between two of the categories for sounds that we have, two of the targets. So for instance, you might hear a sound that's technically, it's probably actually in between two vowel sounds that in Brazilian Portuguese or your accent in Portuguese. If the sound that someone said isn't either one of those, but it's in the middle or slightly towards one of them, your brain might kind of round up or down, or kind of, almost like a magnet or gravity for the categories, And so the real sound might be in the middle, neither sound, but your brain might say it sounds like this one to keep things simple, or it sounds like this one to keep things simple. And so maybe it's actually in the middle and kind of varying in between those two categories, but your brain might be kind of rounding it in either direction to attempt to help you, to attempt to simplify things. But when it comes to the kind of work we're doing here with accent, arguably that's actually hurting more than it's helping, because we're trying to kind of learn new categories or learn to hear between the categories that we already have when it comes to detailed accent work. Because yeah, sometimes the target for a specific, maybe not even sometimes, maybe often, or maybe even always, the targets for vowels and consonants in a new accent are probably going to be at least a little bit different than what you're already familiar with in your native accent. They may be very similar or effectively the same, but there's going to be very, very often at least a small difference, and in many cases, a big difference And so we have to hear things as something new if we're trying to really, really do a perfectionistic job of doing the new accent. We have to treat it as something new and not assume that just because it sounds kind of like something we already know that it is the same, because it's usually not exactly the same. Or at least I think that's a useful belief to start from. Gabe said, I shadow natives live while listening to my own voice through the earbuds. Haha, IDK if that helps, or if it's just placebo or something. I think that's a great idea. I think it's probably better than placebo would be my guess. I think that is a useful form of feedback. And most likely through the earbuds, there's going to be a really slight delay too, and that can be kind of interesting too. Yeah, you get a split second to kind of after you just said it to hear how you said it sort of from a different angle, sort of from outside of yourself. Or it gives your brain a moment to kind of process the sound in a different way. I don't know. I think it's useful. I do. So, and I've had other clients do that and like doing that and have decent results with that too. So with all this,